Well, let's return to today's rate cut. Welcome news for mortgage holders across the country. And let's bring in now former Treasury Assistant Secretary David Pearl. David, thank you very much for your time. And an excellent article in The Australian yesterday, by the way. We spoke about it here on the show last night. Look, in your view, has the RBA caved into political pressure, or do you think there was a strong case for a rate cut?
Thanks for having me on, Sharri. My view is that there was not a strong case for a rate cut, and I base that on the test Michelle Bullock and her board set for themselves some time ago to be met before a rate cut should happen. And that was, as you know, that they are confident that inflation has returned sustainably to its 2 to 3 point band. And that test has not been met. There are three factors, Sharri. One, headline inflation, as everybody knows, is still above 3%. We've had 1 quarter of inflation that came in below expectations, but one swallow doesn't make a summer. Secondly, the labour market is gaining strength. Employment is growing strongly. Vacancies are rising. So there's no sign that the restriction in the rates is slowing labour market activity. And thirdly, there's the massive uncertainty associated with Donald Trump, his threats of trade wars. The US Fed has lost confidence in its own inflation strategy and a signal that it's not going to cut. So for those reasons, based on the tests that Michelle Bullock set, there was not a strong case. I don't think it was even a line ball decision.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear you say that. So would the public campaign, the political pressure have played into this? And, you know, we know that the Treasury Secretary sits on the board. So what sort of influence would he have in these discussions?
I've spent part of my career, Sharri, as an Assistant Secretary, briefing a former Treasury Secretary for his participation in the board. I've read hundreds of Treasury minutes up to the Secretary, previous secretaries, putting the whole weight of Treasury's expertise behind them to influence the board.
Wow.
So unlike every other OECD serious country which does not allow political actors or people who report to politicians and serve at the pleasure of politicians to make monetary policy decisions, we do. And to me, having lived and worked in the US and spoken about this to American central bankers, I've just found it remarkable. Now, in the past, that influence was subtle, but I think it's fair to say that Jim Chalmers and Stephen Kennedy have not been subtle over the past 6 months to 1 year. I've written about it in The Australian. Stephen Kennedy, for example, is very close to Ross Garnaut. He's worked with him. He's friends with him. They share the same views on inflation. And Ross Garnaut bullied Michelle Bullock late last year. And the Financial Review, as you know, revealed that Garnaut rang up their op-ed editor to demand that his piece, pretty much insisting on a rate cut last December, be published so it influenced Bullock. So there may be no connection with Stephen Kennedy, but I think that he was a voice for cutting in the board, whether he genuinely, I'm sure he genuinely believes that, but there's no mistake that that's what his boss wants. And then secondly, he has Labor-aligned economists who he's close to been beating the drum constantly. So for me, it hasn't been subtle. And I think that more than anything else has really shown this decision to be a political capitulation.
I'm so glad you're on the show tonight, because that is the most fascinating insight of how a Treasury Secretary can wield influence on the board, especially if they are highly political, as you say. Now, Michelle Bullock said publicly today herself that there was, she didn't use the word heated, but that there was rigorous discussion and debate about whether there should be a rate cut. So that indicates there absolutely wasn't a unanimous view on the board. At least initially they might have arrived at one. But there's also signals, doesn't it, that there wasn't an obvious case for a cut?
Not at all. And in fact, I read the RBA board statement before I came on tonight. And if you remove the references to the decision and just read the economic data and analysis in that statement, nobody would believe that the board was announcing a cut. Because the statement was quite upfront. It said we've had 1 quarter of below expectation inflation. It said that that's increased our confidence that inflation is returning to target. Not that it gives us confidence, and it's quite upfront about the labour market getting stronger and the risks of inflation, potential reflation resurgent getting more serious. So if you take out the decision, I was staggered because there's not a strong case at all.
So is this political interference? Could this be political interference then?
Well, call me a cynic, but when I read in the paper yesterday that Jim Chalmers was telling the backbench to cool their horses, I thought, well, that shows that he knows the fix is in. And then when I tuned on the television, I saw that the cameras were in the meeting room. I thought, well, Chalmers or his media people wanted that because they knew that there was going to be a favourable decision. I have no evidence of that, but anybody that's savvy with how things operate in Canberra wouldn't mistake that at all. So for me, it's a political capitulation. Even if it isn't, it has the appearance of one. And as I said, we've got a flawed board structure where we have the Treasury Secretary there. That's not acknowledged for some reason by the media. It's a bit like Anthony Fauci, Sharri, to use an example that would appeal to you, appointing a board to advise him on the origins of COVID and having his right-hand man on it. Would you accept for a moment the integrity of that recommendation, or would you have question marks?
Well, we've been reporting it on the show tonight, the fact that he's on there, and last night. David Pearl, you are brilliant. I'm so glad you came on the show. They were invaluable insights. Thank you for your time.